Hey everybody, I'm Toussaint Morrison. Thank you so much for tuning back into the Social Science Club. Click like on this video if you find it of value and click subscribe if you haven't already. Let's jump right into it. Today we're going to talk about, can you be pro-cop and say Black Lives Matter at the same time? So I thought about this video a lot, and where I want to start with this is at the origins of the United States of America. When we start at the origins of the United States of America, you have to figure out how was it founded first. And so when we talk about how the United States was founded, it was founded on stolen land and enslaved labor. Now, much of that enslaved labor, if not all of it, was on the backs of black people. And with the origins of law enforcement, with enslaved labor being on plantations all throughout the country, law enforcement started out being runaway slave catchers, which meant when an enslaved person ran away from a plantation, law enforcement was there to go and catch that person, which was, if not all the time, a black person. So if we're starting there, and I'll frame this question to you as it was framed to me once by a friend of mine here in the city of Minneapolis. If you are starting out baking a cake, can you bake a good cake from crooked flour or bad flour? And that being said, that's a question for you. And that's a question for all of us to kind of dive into today. Many people will say that you can't be pro-cop and say Black Lives Matter at the same time, but maybe you can. Maybe there's a liminal space. Maybe the answer is no, as people would think off the bat. Let's jump into it. With the origins of law enforcement in the United States starting at being runaway slave catchers, we find that the roots of law enforcement are already racially profiling, have a litany of racial disparity, and are heavily favoring the people that they were sworn to protect in the first place was white community members. Now, starting from there, let's take a look at where policing is at today in this country. So I sourced out a website called mappingpoliceviolence.us. And so they give a lot of great graphs and numbers and stats on where policing is at right now. So where policing is at right now, as I'm filming this on September 12th, 2023, police have already killed 779 people in the United States. Police killings are increasing in rural areas more than they are in urban areas, maintaining a steady rate of 50% in suburban areas. Now, the racial disparity between where police kill black people versus white people is a very large gap. And right now, we're in Minneapolis. We have the largest racial disparity in police killings in the country. And we're sitting right next to Boston. And right next to that is Washington, D.C. and Pittsburgh, I believe. But right now, where we stand in Minneapolis, black people are 28 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. I'll repeat that again. 28 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. So there's a large racial disparity there off the bat. Now, in another video, we can jump into how that's occurring, resources, economics, schooling, a lot of other institutions that have racial disparity in them, and then also become a byproduct, or they're part of the whole pie of police killings going forward. So there's that. Now, we also have to take a look at how many police are killing people and not being charged. So mappingpoliceviolence.us ran the stats, and they found from 2013 to 2022, 98.1% of police who kill somebody have no charges brought to them. So psychologically, when we look at continuing to do something and getting away with it, you're going to keep doing it, right? Because you're getting away with it. There's no punishment coming along with it. If there is a punishment or a consequence that comes along with an activity, you're probably going to check yourself before you do that again. However, with police in America, 98.1% of police have not faced charges from 2013 to 2022 who have killed somebody. I would go as far to say, just my own personal opinion and guess, that in that 98.1%, not all of those killings were justified. And the way that you define justification may not be the same way that I define justification of excessive force or lethal force, may not be the same way that a Supreme Court defines lethal force or excessive force upon somebody, and may not be the same way that your DA defines lethal force. So all of those things coming together, you have to understand that there are so many hands at play that will define what lethal force is, and there are many DAs that really don't want to bring charges to police because a lot of that goes hand in hand. The DA needs the police to bring people to them, bring people that have committed criminal activity to them, and the police need the DA to prosecute those people. So they go hand in hand. A lot of times you don't want to ruin that relationship. If you are a DA, historically, we don't see that happen all the time. We did see it with a few DAs on the West Coast, and they were actually taken away from their job. If you look at some of the DAs on the West Coast, we can put that in the description below for you to catch back up on that. That being said, 98.1% of police from 2013 to 2022 have not faced charges who have killed somebody. So there's a very small amount of police officers that have faced charges. Now, we got to move forward. 33% of those people who were killed by police were either running away, driving away, or otherwise trying to flee. Black and brown people were more likely to be killed while fleeing. So if we take a look at that, if we have several different demographics run away from police, and we find that black people are most likely to be killed while fleeing, that shows us that there is an inherent racial bias in policing in the United States that is going to be using lethal force upon black bodies more than any other body, or AKA any other white people. So when we look at the gap between how black people are being treated versus white people, and not to leave out anybody else, but we're looking at how black people are being treated versus white people in mappingpoliceviolence.us, you're finding that police are treating white people with more, you could say, compassion, grace, insert word here, which is non-lethal force, and they're using more excessive force and lethal force on black people while they're fleeing. So we also have to take into account, I live here in Minneapolis. So in May 25th of 2020, the Minneapolis police force murdered George Floyd, a black man, in broad daylight, what many people called a lynching. And even though you saw it on the video, what happened, there were many police that disputed it and said, whoa, now we need to wait for all the facts before we can actually make a determinant whether these cops killed him or not. Whereas for many people, again, I go back to that thing of justification. We may all have different definitions of justified lethal force. Many people saw it and said, yeah, nah, they killed him. That's murder, what we saw. And the other three cops were an accomplice to it, which is what a federal court found them guilty for as well. Now, the thing that you'll have to take into account here when we're talking about being pro-cop, is it an either-or situation? I want to go to this quote from Trevor Noah in 2016 after Philando Castile was killed by Geronimo Yanez, a police officer here in Minnesota, and after Michael Brown was killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri. Trevor Noah said, you shouldn't have to choose between the police and the people they're sworn to protect. So in that statement, Trevor is telling us that it doesn't have to be either-or. You can be for the police and doing better, and then also be for the people that they're sworn to protect. When we talk about lethal force being used against the people that they're sworn to protect, we're saying that maybe you can treat everybody how you possibly treat the people that you kill the least, which would be predominantly white people. So when we look at the research and the criteria from mappingpoliceviolence.us, and we look at who are they predominantly taking lethal force out on more than anyone else, maybe we can take a different look at it and say, okay, what if you treated everybody like you treat the people that survive most of these police altercations? Then maybe we would have a better police department. Now, there are some people that might be watching this video and say, to hell with the police department altogether. You might be an abolitionist, you might be a police, you might believe in police reform to the point that we just need to do away with what we have right now and totally hit reset. You may think that we need an entirely new safety commission and need to reimagine public safety entirely differently. And that is a thing as well. And in some cases, that could be pro-cop, or it could just be imagining a different situation. It could be imagining a future where police exist, but in an entirely different way. And if you have any of those ideas, I would love to hear about them in the comments below, or put any links in there if your city attempted to ever do that. We tried to do that here in Minneapolis, but the vote didn't go through. So I go back to the original question. Can you be pro-cop and say Black Lives Matter at the same time? For me, I don't look at pro-cop as saying, hey, cops are doing great. Hey, police are doing an all right job. I go back, this is my answer for you. I go back to one of the MDHR meetings, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights meetings that we had recently to discuss the racism in the Minneapolis Police Department. And one of the women from the MDHR department kept checking people in the meeting, and I said, according to Reuters, for every 6 black people that are getting assaulted by police, 1 white person's getting assaulted. Are we trying to are these meetings so we can get it to 3 to 1, 2 to 1, or 1 to 1? And she looked at me very blindly and didn't really have a full-on answer, because for me, living in a world as a black person in the United States, living in the United States as a black person, for me, would be that there is no racial disparity and that everybody is looked at equally. Do we live in that world? Absolutely not. So do I look at police and say they can do vastly better? Absolutely. Do I believe that there are alternatives to policing? Yes, I do. Do I need to do some more research before I can propose that utopia of what that is? Absolutely. And for me, my answer to the question is, yeah, I can definitely be pro-cop and want them to do immensely better. Fire all killer cops, do away with the union, radically change the way that they look at policing, and say Black Lives Matter at the same time, say that my life matters at the same time. The question to you is, what does it mean to you to be pro-cop? So I think a lot of people are gonna have a lot of different answers to this, and I hope that mappingpoliceviolence.us, me asserting that into here, gave you an idea of some context as to how you can look at this in a different way. And I'm gonna put the link to that below. I hope that this video brought you some clarity or gave you some context to what's going on. And I also wanna hear what your thoughts are. Can you say pro-cop and say Black Lives Matter at the same time? Put it in the comments below. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you. If you found this video of any value, click like. If not, you don't have to click like. We'll see you in the next one.